just kept going. And, it took a lot of convincing of the cities to do this. And we asked the cities, we said, look, we will give you a guarantee of part of this money, because they looked at how much money it was, knowing that there's 16 billion. As a city commissioner, they were salivating a little more. And we said 10%, and you get to determine where that goes. It's up to you. Yeah, we'll give it all to we'll give that money to the MPO. The cities vote on it together. The cities would vote on it together. And why was that important? Because at the MPO, we sit right next to everybody. Everybody's there, and you got to be fair to everybody. Because if you're not fair, somebody's gonna talk about it. And you're gonna, it had to be fair. So we made sure that every city was included. Everybody had a bite at the apple. And before we even started, we said, put your projects in now. Put them in now. Because they still had all the projects left over from the one that failed, the 2016. We said, bring them all in, we'll take care of all of them. And we said, no limit, no cap, no nothing, bring them in. And at that point, the cities are going, really? Okay, we'll do it. And we had them on board. We had also just had the wave. The wave was a huge project that was in Fort Lauderdale. That was a streetcar project that went all around and had been funded by FTA, everybody, to a point of $1 billion. To me, I was thinking $1 billion. But anyway, it was much less. But anyway, that had gone through, it had been approved by everybody, county, everybody, but then another group of commissioners came in and they were all back up. They were getting as far away from that as they could. And so everybody had to find the voting it down. You had a lot of the public said they didn't want it. And what we did is we said, if you don't want that, then I hope you will vote for this, which is good. You can't be against, because they would say we're against the wave. We're for mass transit, but we don't want the wave. And I kind of wondered, I said, if you're not for this, but you're saying you want mass transit, then you need to be helping us get this passed. And it actually took away a lot of the opposition, because there was a lot of opposition to the wave. All in Fort Lauderdale, we needed that. So we actually ended up getting all the cities, and we got all the naysayers to the wave, and that helped. And it slowly brought on the Broward Workshop, who were big on the wave. And the Broward Workshop, which is our economic council, came kind of slowly to the table, but they finally got there. And that made a big difference. And the things that you're seeing here helped tremendously. One, we had an entire plan that had to be, it was the first time that Oaxaca, you see like, this is the first time the state legislature had passed a statute, a bill. It passed a bill that said if you're doing a tax, it has to go through an audit before it can go to the voters. That helped us. Because we were able to say with a straight face, this has already been audited. This has already gone through whether it is economically feasible. Does it make sense economically? And it had been looked at from many ways. It had been looked at as helping with TODs, transit-oriented development. It had been looked at in terms of resiliency. It had been looked at from lots of different perspectives. And that helped us tremendously, because depending on who we were going to try to persuade to help us on this, it had already gone through the gauntlet, so to speak. And we were able to say, take a look at this. It's already passed muster on many ways. So I think those were some of the key parts of how it helped us get it through. Anything like that? Oh, yes. Simultaneously, at the MPO, we were putting through our long-range plan. It was the LRT 40. They come every 5 years. But anyway, so that part, that was like, there was some synergy. And there was kind of like they were heading the same way. So we were able to say, our MPO plan matches this. We're in lockstep with this. And when you have everybody kind of growing the same way, it makes all the difference. We essentially had diffused in the opposition. At first, it was, the MPO, I would say, was not totally in line with the pig tail. I think you. But as we wrote the 40 plan, and as we brought on the cities and said, you're gonna have some, money here. Everybody started to go, okay, we'll do this. And so we really did not have the opposition that we thought we might have. And I think that's, I had no idea how much it would pass time. And I was, I was actually on TV talking about the election, the other elections, when it came through. I'm going, it was a landslide. It's a landslide when it went through. And it was like, whoa, I know it's gonna be close. I think close. People want it. This is something that they know affects them. If you can tell them how it affects them, how it affects the quality of life, how it affects more time with the family, how it's going to help on housing. Because with our housing, we know that like over 50% of our cost burden, it goes to 67% with transportation. So you tie those things together, you're talking about a lot of people's lives and how it makes a difference. And there were other parts to it. I'm just going to take a little side trip. When we were talking about the fiber optics that gets laid down when we do this. I mean, you start thinking about the opportunity when you're laying down fiber optics just for transportation. But if you're laying down the fiber optics for transportation, you're also able to lay it down for safety, communication, for all kind of other things. And suddenly, for those who've been city commissioners, you've been to smart cities and talked about that. Now you're talking about a smart channel. Because you're talking about fiber optics that connect your entire county, that can look at resilience, you can measure water depth, you can measure, public, you've increased all kinds of things in public safety, you're syncing up traffic lights. The list goes on and on and on with what you can bring to the table. And now you're suddenly you're able to tell people, this is going to help you on this. And then people that you're, because somewhere along there, included. And you have to find out where well, I think we've run out of slides. Somewhere I looked at the slide anyway. That's where, I think that's our story.
Thank you, Vice.
Yeah,
Did you want to add something?
No, you said that's our story, so I can stick it to
And Brendan, if you could please introduce yourself and your role for the town.
Well, I am Gretchen Cassini. I am the Mobility Advancement Program Administrator, which is just a fancy way of saying a person who kind of coordinates with all of my partners at the county and the cities and at DOT District 4, the Oversight Board and the Appointing Authority for the Transportation Surplus Program.
She was also instrumental in this. And, yeah, I don't know how many places you went to talk, but there were a lot.
And Randall, you as well. I forgot you should come next. Yeah.
So good morning, I'm Randall Vitale, I'm from the BDX Capital Partners. And I spent about the last 10 years as a volunteer from the business community focused on transportation. We have a very similar sales group in Broward County called Broward Workshop, which is a group of business leaders and CEOs. I co-chaired that transportation committee for about that time. I also have a lot of time that I spent in Palm Beach County. I was in Wellington Saturday for a wedding. In-laws in Palm Beach Gardens. My wife was born and raised in Beltway, and so I spent a lot of time here as well. My role this morning is to talk both about the oversight board and the importance that it had when we went to the ballot, but also we do this during the roundtable, the importance of the business community's engagement on this process. So when we put the language on the ballot, or the county, I should say, put the language on the ballot, one of the items that was really important to the community was an independent oversight board being engaged and involved in the process. And this is independent in a way that it's different than a lot of county boards where the county commissioners are the ones who appoint the members. Here we have an appointing authority, which I had the pleasure of chairing since 2019. Hey, it's great. Since 2019, and all of those roles are defined by the ordinance. So you'll see the Council of Chambers, the League of Cities, the Urban League, Expanded Unity, Broward County Administrator, we have from FAU, and I'm the Broward Workshop representative. So this group appoints the oversight. So we are independent because we're called out specifically in the ordinance, and then we select through an application process the oversight board. Those oversight board members come from 8 professional categories, and then there's 1 resident user of public transportation. The commitment that they all make up front and is vetted by the county is conflict of interest. There's obviously a policy against anyone receiving fines or related businesses. And there's a vetting process that makes sure that that happens. And then there's an annual attestation to make sure that that is continued on an ongoing basis. So the oversight board truly is responsible for oversight, but in a very independent, transparent way. And we work with Gretchen, the oversight board does, to make sure that statute is being followed, and the projects are in line with statute requirements at Florida level, but also the planning process with the MPO that was just mentioned by me. So that's my introduction, and I'll certainly be able to answer questions about business community's role as we move on. Thank you.
And good morning again. I'm just going to talk very briefly, as I was asked to, about the budget and the projection of the revenues and the forecast. So obviously our current FY 2023 audit is underway. And so what you are looking at are the revenues from the transportation sales surtax through the end of fiscal year 2022. We had approximately $1.6 billion. And as I know you were all painfully aware, we did have those 2 years of the pandemic where our projected revenues were quite a bit below what we had anticipated. It did take until fiscal year 2022 before we actually came back in 23, before we actually started to level off again and get back to where we expected to be after those 4 years. 2.8 billion has been budgeted and appropriated, and that goes back to what Vice Mayor Burr was referencing with respect to leveraging this program against existing block grants, formula grants, and discretionary grants, both through our Public Works Department as well as our Transportation Department. And then approximately $13 million has been budgeted and appropriated for municipal projects of all types. So, as was referenced previously, the cities were invited to submit any projects that were transportation mobility related at any cost. And, over the last 4 years, our partners at the MPO have evaluated, ranked, and recommended those capital projects that were in the original plan, as well as some new projects. And then, of course, it was really important, and our policy body was very committed to making sure that not only did we have adequate reserves available when it was time for us to go out and start doing our premium transit capital investments, but that we also had some available funding for our Broward County Aviation Department, which isn't really referenced here. There was a large and significant investment in their automated people mover project, as well as their intermodal center in the current fiscal year from the surtax, which will be leveraged heavily at the federal and state level. Some of our major accomplishments to date, many of the things that you do with the transportation surtax that we do in Broward County are hard to translate. It's hard to explain to the public the fiber optic investments that Vice Mayor just referenced. So we've worked very hard at not only delivering projects, but also telling a more compelling story to the public about those investments using 3D videos. We've been doing a lot of grassroots outreach. We are actually going to be doing a groundbreaking for augmented and virtual reality open to the public space, where we can try to teach people how to utilize transportation more effectively, working with our partners in transit and public works. Obviously, we've been really successful in leveraging some federal and state grants, one of which was a real collaborative project with the MPO for the Safe Streets and Roads for All, creating an action plan for Broward County. And then one of the major goals of the 30-year program was economic development benefits. And the Broward County Commission put a 30% local preference goal on all eligible projects in the 30-year program. And to date, we have 78 projects that have those goals on them, and they are projected to create over 2,600 direct, indirect, and induced jobs, and bring $424 million to local businesses in Broward County. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the GM CEO, Director of Transportation, Corey Pavloni. Wow.
Okay, thank you, sorry. And all those titles and then someone wanted to go call some mom. So, having said that, I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you for having us. I'm so excited for you. The fact that you're in this room today, spending your time, considering all the options you have in front of you, to pay for transportation is amazing. I know there's other things that you could be doing today, but it shows a lot of commitment to improving mobility here in this county when you're here today. So thank you again for having us, and I hope that you find what we're going to say helpful. So I'm here really to talk about the translation of all the good efforts that Vice Mayor Furr and Gretchen talked about that got us to this point today. I wish I could have said that I was a part of that, but since today is my anniversary, my 1 year in Broward County, I was not there. But I'm glad to be here now today because this is where it really starts to happen. So the hard part was getting it passed. That is the hard part. Spending the money is a little easier and a lot more fun, to be fair. So to talk a little bit about the premium mobility plan, so Vice Mayor Furr talked about some of the items that were put in front of the public to consider. And the premium mobility plan is that document that kind of is our North Star in terms of how we were going to lay out transit for and transportation improvements, particularly in the public transportation space going forward. So the premium mobility plan, called PREMO for short, is a 15-year initiative. What we're going to be doing is we're going to move from a bus-only company to a true multimodal company or agency rather. We will have, in addition to our bus service and our paratransit and our community shuttle and our Lake Ship Connect service. And the Lake Ship Connect is a service that we provide for people who work the third shift, which is always hard. So if you're in the hospitality industry, or any industry for that matter, that has that third shift, it's always hard because our service stops around midnight and picks up again around 5 a.m. And so how do you get home, right? How do you get to work? How do you get home? And so we offer this service through our taxi cab providers to get people to and from work during those hours. And so, so that's what we have today. That's our new first. But now where we're going is we're adding commuter rail, we're adding light rail, and we're adding bus rapid transit. Those are all new modes that we don't have in Broward. However, they're very excellent modes, and a lot of cities and areas around the country do have them. In addition to those 3 new services that we're bringing forward, we're also adding a high frequency bus service. So there's some corridors where it makes a lot of sense that we have this premium mobility available, but there's some that are still kind of not there just yet in terms of ridership projections. And so what we've done is we've augmented that service with high frequency bus service. So overall, when we're done, we're gonna have 200 miles of new public transportation service in Broward County. That service will have a ridership of about 23 million annually. And in addition to that, we'll have 100% of our bus fleet will be electric or zero emission. So we're super excited about that. Right now, we're at about 10% of our fleet being completely green. Interestingly, we just had a bus, a coach bus. So we have a service that is direct from our park and ride facilities in Broward that goes into downtown Miami. And it's run with our partners at the FDOT. They pay for that service for us, but we run it on their behalf. Essentially what happens, those are our choice riders. So a lot of folks that take advantage of that service could actually drive. Unlike a lot of our passengers that are transit dependent, these are riders that are not. And so they choose to take advantage of a 1-seat ride to work, not dealing with any traffic, able to relax, sit back, work, read, whatever they want to do as they travel into Miami. And so the buses that we use for that service, it's a coach bus, which is very similar to like a Greyhound bus, over the road bus. And so it's very comfortable too to be on that bus. And so we have our first electric bus in that category actually in service now. It's been in service a couple of weeks now, so we're really excited that that has joined our fleet. And so, you know, by 2035, we should have all of our fleet electric, so we're looking forward to that. In addition to the vehicles and the new service that we're going to provide, we're also through this investment able to provide intelligent transportation systems. What that means from a bus perspective is for our bus rapid transit service. And if you don't know what BRT is, we throw a lot of acronyms in this industry, so I apologize for that, throw them around like the water. But really what that is a bus that has a priority standing on your road. So it's an articulated bus, it's a little bigger than a traditional bus, it can carry more passengers. But at an intersection, for example, it would have priority over any vehicle that's at that intersection. Also, typically the BRT service comes with dedicated traffic lanes. So it's not going to stop at every corner like a normal bus service would. You pull the cord and stop when you need us to, but with the BRT, it's set up like stations. So you're going to stop typically every mile or so. And so that service is one that we're excited to bring. But the Intelligent Transportation Center systems will help us navigate traffic and have a priority at the intersections. And so Gretchen mentioned the comprehensive operational analysis. So we haven't done one of these in quite some time. We did do a system study to identify the corridors that, best fit our premium mobility, structure or framework. And then, from that informed the type of, service that we should provide on that corridor. And so the comprehensive operational analysis is something that, we typically do every 5 years or so, which really has you take a hard look at your existing service and try to figure out, where you can make improvements. And so the great thing that we have with the surtax is that we can do more now from the results of this comprehensive operational analysis. I believe the last one we did was about 5 years ago. And the reason why that's exciting for us is that it affords us the opportunity to not keep the network that we have today, but it gives us the opportunity to respond to the demand of the current times that we live in, and then we can plan for future times. So that's a huge advantage that we have with the surtax funding, that otherwise, if we did not have that money, we would not be able to do that. So as you look ahead for the next 5 years, we're gonna be really busy. And so in 2023, we wrapped up our premium mobility study, which resulted in the product that we're talking about today. Our commission back in June 23 unanimously voted in favor of us moving forward with the Primo plan. That was huge. I don't know anywhere in politics now today where you have unanimous approval, but we were able to get that through, we were really excited for from a commission perspective. And then, so for 24-25, we're gonna be focusing on getting ready to deliver the service. So we're gonna do stuff like buying new equipment. We're completing our environmental analysis. So one of the projects I'm just gonna talk about in a minute has a very extensive environmental analysis that we have to do. And so I'll just hold that thought for just a second. But we're also doing our design development during this time period. And we're getting our workforce ready to take up the service. As you can imagine, going from a bus company to a multimodal system is not easy. And so we have to get ready for that with the right talent in place to do that. So in 2026, our plan is to introduce our hydrogen bus service. That service will operate at about 15-minute intervals on our high frequency corridors. In 2027, our goal is to open up our commuter rail service. So Vice Mayor Burr mentioned that that's a service that's going to operate on the FEC corridor. We will hopefully, we're, fingers crossed that date stays firm, but there's some things recently that happened that we may have to push that out a bit. But the overall intention here is for us to open something that resembles commuter rail in 2027, if it's not the full system. And then in 2028, that's when we launch our first BRT service and LRT. So the BRT service will be on Oakland Park Boulevard. That is actually happening now. We have making significant progress in that project in terms of our environmental document wrapping up. We are funding that 100% with surtax funds. So one of the advantages of having the surtax dollars, as Gretchen mentioned, is it helps us to leverage our FTA funding, federal transportation funding, administration funding, which is federal dollars that, sometimes they're looking for a 50% match. Sometimes you can go up to a 90% commitment from the federal government, with a 10% being a local match, whether that's a combination of state or local funds. But again, here's an advantage of having the surtax, having that dedicated funding. Those grants, quite frankly, are very competitive. So they don't just look at your project and say, that's a great idea, Broward, way to go, we're gonna give you $100 million. That's not quite how it works. What happens is every city almost in this country also has something like a Primo plan or some kind of thing that they want to expand, or they want to do a state of repair project, or they want to do something that improves or enhances their service, and they're also competing with us. And while I think Broward is the center of the universe, the rest of the country does not. And so, and to be fair for, the federal government, they have to spread those funds, evenly, typically around the country. And so we're competing with projects like the connection between Los Angeles and Nevada, and, the Hudson River, Tunnel Project, which connects, New Jersey and, New York City, high population centers, which is always a draw for the federal government, right? But also, those are projects that have been in the works for many, many decades. Because of the ridership that they carry, they're very competitive compared to the ridership that we're talking about carrying. So, that's the advantage, a significant advantage of having surtax funds, is you're kind of in control of your own destiny from that perspective. And it also, when you go for those grants, they like to know that you can pay for not only your match, but also your operating costs, which is one of the criteria that they consider in those grants. And it's, if you build it, can you pay for it, and can you keep it running? And they don't want you to be in a situation where you can't commit to operating that asset for its useful life. So that's something that, again, is an advantage of having surtax funds. So, very quickly, I talked about the Broward County, the Broward Commuter Rail South project. So, Commissioner Furr, Vice Mayor Furr, talked about that a little bit, but, this is 11.5 miles of commuter rail service along the FECR corridor, which is right here where Brightline is on. We'll have stations at 3 locations on that corridor. We're gonna have a station at, in the south at Hollywood, one at the airport, and then one at the Broward Health Hospital in Fort Lauderdale. So those will be the 3 initial stations. Once we figure out how to cross the New River, we'll be heading north and connecting hopefully soon with our colleagues here in Palm Beach County, which we can't wait to do. So that is the future heading north, but heading south, the Miami-Dade County will be building 5 new stations, starting, an Aventura station is existing, but we'll be able to travel from South Broward into downtown Miami, also on the commuter rail project. So we're really excited about this, and it will be opening, like I said, those dates are firm here, sort of. And from a ridership perspective, we're looking at about 1.25 million annually. When you add the Miami portion on, that brings us up to about 4.5. And the cost for this project right now, so is about $317 million. We are in the process of our environmental documentation. And so unlike our colleagues in Miami who are able to get a categorical exclusion on their project and a CE, we have to do an environmental assessment, which is just a little more comprehensive than that type of environmental clearance, but it's not an environmental impact statement, which is incredibly comprehensive, but also very time consuming. So we're in the middle there. So by March, we will have completed our environmental document. We will be submitting that to the FTA, and then the FTA will evaluate our application and hopefully approve it and give us the green light to start our grant application in full form there. So that is where that project is, and it's moving right along very nicely. And then our light rail project, which is one we'd like to highlight because this is one that connects our economic engines that are owned by Broward County, and one that is so needed. So this particular light rail project will be elevated. We are going to connect our airport, seaport, and convention center. So we will be totally and truly intermodal from that perspective. It will support our visitors who are coming into the airport and need to go to the cruise lines and or the convention center. And it'll also support employees that need to go to work in those locations, whether it's support the airport or the seaport. And so that project is very expensive. It's about $1.3 billion in terms of the overall investment just for that segment of it. But as we build it out, we're going to take that initial investment and head west and eventually get to Sawgrass Mills Mall. So in closing, there's a couple ancillary benefits that aren't on on the slides that I just want to share with you, because I think it's important as you consider, making this decision and how to move forward, things that typically aren't talked about. So, one of the things that's a major, opportunity here is that, and I'm looking at it from my perspective, sitting in my role, is that now I know, because I have operating money and maintenance dollars, I know that the things that I want to do can be paid for and can actually happen. And that's huge when you're sitting in a role where you're responsible for delivering transportation services, because my colleagues around the country, every year they're trying to figure out how to pay for O&M. Every single year. It is not a guarantee, and in transit, you never, ever, ever fully recover your expenses from the fare box. It just isn't done. And so, and in the event that we were able to do that, the cost would be extremely high for our ridership. Our ridership, 30% of them earn an income of under $10,000 a year. So as we look at even increasing those fares, it would disadvantage quite a few people who really do need us. About 9% of them, and we just did a survey of them, told us that if it weren't for transit, they could not get to work, school, or doctor's appointments. So that's one of the reasons why, from a public policy perspective, the decision has been made across the country and globally, quite frankly, that, fare box isn't the place to pay for transit. Where it is the place to pay for it is through subsidies, depending on where the subsidies come from. So that's one thing that your agency doesn't have to worry about. And when you don't have to worry about year over year where your funding is coming from, you can plan better and you can anticipate challenges and respond to them better. The other thing is that it's a huge recruitment tool. It really is. I mean, people want to go where the action is. And they also want to go where there's some certainty in their jobs and where it can be fulfilling. And so I think that again is something that people don't talk about. It's very specific to the transportation agencies on the recipient end of that funding, but it is a good tool to attract folks to work with us and for us and to stay for longer periods of time. The other thing is that the customers look differently at a system that is expanding and growing than one that is just band-aiding it and just staying at status quo. So that gives you a lot more credibility with the customers. And also, as I told you, we have transit-dependent customers. We still want to serve them, even, with the pre-mode plan, but they're the riders that have choices. Those are the riders that also will be very helpful to improve mobility if we can get them out of their cars. They want to know that you're making those investments in transportation and that this isn't something that's going to go away tomorrow because it's not funded. And then, what's super obvious is the economic development side of it. So for every dollar of effort, every $1 billion of transportation investments that you make in public transit, according to the American Public Transportation Association, which is our trade industry, they calculated that 49,000 jobs come from that. So from an economic development perspective, not only are you building out a mobility network that can improve traffic conditions in Palm Beach County, but you're also able to offer some jobs that may not have been there otherwise. So for us, our overall pre-mode plan is valued at about $4.3 billion at this point. So, doing the math, that's a significant number of jobs that will be available to us, not only, construction jobs and typical jobs you expect in that environment, but also from a long range perspective in terms of the operation and maintenance of that asset over the long haul. The other advantage to that investment from an economic development perspective is the fact that it does get developers super excited. The whole connection between rail and you build it and it will come. It's one of those things that people say, oh, that could be. No, it happens if it's at the right place. And so the development community gets excited. And so what that lends itself to potentially is what's called transit-oriented development. So from a land use planning perspective, you're able to, take advantage of people living and working a lot in walkable communities, served by, public transportation. So, those are some of the other highlights that, again, sometimes aren't talked about. I just wanted to share that with you, and make you aware of those advantages too. And with that, I want to thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, as we move on to the next segment, which I don't know what it is, so I'm very.
Thank you, Corey. And actually, that was a great closing and kind of running through all of the benefits. Huge recruitment tool for people and business, access and connectivity for people, developers like it, economic development payback, huge. And you touched on the airport, a little bit because of the Airport Seaport Connector, Airport Seaport Convention Center Connector, which connects the major economic engines. But there's, you don't have time to touch on it right now, maybe we will on the roundtable, but even the additional benefits for the realization of FLL's master plan and how it can benefit that. So thank you all so very much for that. Great information. Keep your questions for the roundtable. We'll get to that. And now Javier, Alice, move on to Miami-Dade County. Please introduce yourselves.
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Javier Betancourt. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. We're a quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing our half-penny sales tax for transportation. I'm an urban planner by trade. I actually started my career with the South Florida Regional Planning Council. So, I always embed regionalism into everything I do. Very happy to be here today. So thanks for having me. My partner, Brian.
Good morning, everyone. I was Bravo and Associates, and prior to going back to the private sector, I was the Director of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County, where I worked side by side with Javier for having years developing the SMART plan and helping move those corridors forward. Prior to that, I was Deputy City Manager for the City of Miami, where I learned the importance of the private sector and government collaborating in terms of land use and transit planning. And prior to that, I was with the Florida Department of Transportation, where learned a lot about E3 projects and again, how to collaborate and the financial structure you need for the projects to move forward. Very glad to be here today and help with this mission.
And we're in the tag team, and we worked so long together that I think we can finish each other's sentences. So I'm going to start with just kind of how did we get to the referendum? Then a little bit about us, just a little bit, because I don't think you want to focus on that. Then we'll talk about the money, which I know you care about, and then we'll talk about the projects and the next steps. So back in 2002, really it started before that. We had a lot of issues, just as you do now, just as all of Florida does. We had a booming population growth, unbearable traffic congestion. That hasn't changed. Limited capacity for roadway expansion. We were essentially built out, continue to be. And we have a limited, aging, and underfunded transit system. We had the Metro Rail, Metro Mover, and an extensive bus network. But there was never enough funding really to operate it and maintain it properly. Enter Mayor Alex Pinellas, who you see here in the picture. And he tried a full penny surtax when he first got into office in 1998. But it failed. The voters were not really engaged in formulating the plan. It was kind of a top-down approach. And frankly, they didn't trust the county to manage the funds. There was no oversight board included in that referendum at that time. And people were afraid of the big switch.
And there had actually been, I think, 3 or 4 previous attempts for a dedicated funding source that also did not prevail. But at this time, between the first penny attempt and the half penny, the Florida Department of Transportation was moving 2 major corridor studies, and as DOT warns, you have no chance of getting federal funding unless you have a dedicated funding source.
And I apologize, I think I had a different format on my PowerPoint, so you may still overlap here. So again, Mayor Alex Pinellas, young, visionary, ambitious, great communicator. He was really ambitious. He created a lot of other trusts, homeless trust, the children's trust. It's all about trust. But he learned from the 1998 referendum, as many others in the state of Florida are learning the hard way, that you can't assume a top-down approach. You have to have a bottom-up approach. You have to engage the community in building the plan that they will then support with additional taxes. So they literally had hundreds upon hundreds of community meetings where they not only told the public what they were planning to do, but solicited their input, right? And what would you guys like to see? And I was a part of that. I'm sure Alice was a part of that, in different roles. In addition to that, they dedicated dozens of county employees on a public education campaign. You have to be careful legally on what you allow your county employees to do. But they created a speakers bureau, call centers, community outreach, and they had dozens of people dedicated to this task for months on end. An aggressive earned media campaign, not a lot of money behind traditional advertising, but they did a great job in reaching out to all the media, including in Miami, Spanish radio, which is very important. And then that led to business community support. One of the key opposition figures in previous efforts has been Morgan Brain, of wealthy car dealership owner, and they got him to stand down this time, and that was key. And they're finding many deals in compromises with it to both get the referendum on the ballot and get it passed. Now, there are pros and cons to those compromises, and we're living with some of those consequences today, but to get all the cities on board, they dedicated 20% of the funds were going to go to the cities. They promised free transit to all seniors, the senior voters are very important, so that's really helped. They reduced it to a half penny, so originally I think they were promoting a full penny, but in order to get it past county commission, they had to reduce that to half penny. Unfortunately, they didn't reduce the promises accordingly. So they kind of had a penny's worth of promises that they made to the community, but never really reduced that, and we're still, again, very good consequences. So
I think it's important to note that support from the cities was beautiful. And when I went to the city of Miami, that helped us launch a trolley program, all types of street and transit friendly improvements. So the people that vote for this measure get something very tangible close to them, even if they're not going to be a long-term transit plan.
and we'll show you some other cities that talk fair share of that. All right, so here's the ballot language as it appeared. And it's really important because we often go back to this exact language when we're trying to prove a point. Exhibit A to the ordinance that also gets referenced a lot. So this is how it appeared to the voters. There were some specific promises in there. There was a much more detailed list of projects, of course, included in the ordinance approving the referendum called Exhibit A. And if you see the last sentence in here, it said, and shall be overseen by the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust. So in the referendum itself, they're promising the voters that there's going to be an oversight board that will keep an eye on progress and make sure the money is spent appropriately. And we believe that made a huge difference. Because whenever this went to the voters without that, it failed. And with us, it passed. We like to remind people. Just a little bit about us. Again, it passed in 2002. It's both the surtax, the People's Transportation Plan, which was the list of projects approved, and then the creation of the CITT. And our role is to monitor, audit, review, and oversee and investigate the use of the surtax funds and implementation of the promised projects.
I have to say that when the referendum passed, people were giddy, people were frustrated with traffic, and much like in Broward, people thought, I put a line down their street in 6 months, no pressure, right? So, the devil is in the detail of studies and alternatives and processes. So it's good to talk about that up front, and there's actually language embedded in all these documents that talk about, and how studies have to be done to select the mode. So, you don't wanna give people that expectation that it's guaranteed to happen.
And it's funny, 20 years later, everyone only remembers Metro, right? You promised Metro as well. There were a lot of other things included in the ballot, not just Metro. And even Metro, really, I think we call it rapid transit. I don't think it ever actually said Metro.
Rapid transit and studies to determine the move.
So just real quick, in order to become a member of the Transportation Trust, it is a volunteer board of 15 members, appointed by the 13 county commissioners, the county mayor, and Miami-Dade cities. And really, you just can't be an elected official, you can't have a conflict of interest, and you have to reside in those districts, so pretty simple. Supporting that volunteer board is my office, which I oversee. Again, we're a small office composed of various professionals. I won't go into detail on this. And we do ensure that our operating budget stays at less than 1% of surtax proceeds every year, which I'm really proud of. So operating budget is about $4 million for that oversight function. These are the documents that kind of oversee what we do. We have ordinances, we have an annual plan that we update, which includes all the projects to be funded. There's a very complex project review and approval process that I won't get into. Alice is very familiar with it, but essentially we are a recommending body to the board of county commissioners. they can only override our recommendation with the 2/3. Fair enough. But that power ultimately continues to reside with the elected officials, as I think it should. So one of the major things we do is we audit, not just the county, but all the cities on a 1 to 3 year basis to make sure that those funds are spent appropriately. We do strategic planning and analysis, to help the county, implement the people's transportation plan. So, there's all sorts of stuff we do. You don't care about that, you care about the money. Let's see what we've done with that. All right, since its inception in 2002, we've now collected almost $5 billion. So that little half penny adds up to quite a bit. And 2/3 of that has gone to 90-day transit. About 20% now, it's actually increased over years as we've had more cities incorporate. So it's more like a quarter has now gone to the cities. Less than 10% actually gone to the public works side of the equation for roadway type improvements. So people now think you spent it all on roadways. Well, not really. All the roadway projects that were listed got done, and so it's more visible, but actually it's a very small percentage of the pie. And then, as I said, less than 1% for.
And I think the importance that the half penny going to transit plays in planning these major rapid transit corridors cannot be overstated. As you pursue these corridor studies, they cost millions of dollars, $10 million, $15 million, and that's for the study phase. That gets you to the threshold of knocking on the FTA's door and beginning the small starts, the new starts process. That requires more investment for preliminary engineering. And then along the way, the FTA rates your project and they actually rate your community. Part of the rating includes the health of your transit system, the age of your buses, the fact that you have O&M funds into the future. They're looking out at a 20, 30, 40-year horizon to evaluate the health of your system. So having this dedicated funding source is essential and paramount.
Absolutely. And here's kind of the same information presented on an annual basis. And what this points out, this is where the money went to over the years. And you'll see that blue bar on top is MDT operating. So while it was supposed to be new money for new projects, i.e. transit expansion, the reality is we found out very quickly as a county that you can't build new until you fix what you have, right? Your system has to be in a state of good repair, and it simply wasn't. So a lot of the funds in the initial years had to go to subsidizing operations, maintenance, and infrastructure upgrades. So we replaced all the fleets, Metro Rail fleet, Metro Mover fleet, bus fleet. All that costs a lot of money, but it has to be done. Because as Alice said earlier, the feds are not going to give you more money until they know that your existing system is in a state of good repair and sustainable. Okay, so this is this year's budget. So now 75% is going to transit. And again, you see that share of public works is actually getting smaller and smaller. It's going to be zero because we're not adding roadway projects. We're really focused on transit, specifically the smart grid, which we'll get into. Of course, there's a 40-year pro forma that looks at all these investments over a 40-year time frame. It's probably a $10 billion pro forma at this point. And frankly, doesn't fund everything we want to do. So there are fiscal cliffs in here. There are gaps that we need to start really thinking about how we're going to fill that. And there is some initial talk about us going back for another half penny. But frankly, I think the odds of it getting approved are slim unless we start showing some real progress on this smart plan first. All right, so that's the money. Now let's talk about what we've done. So, in case you're not familiar with it, this is the transit system as it exists today. In the middle, you have the bus network, which is the real workhorse of the system. Metro Rail, Metro Mover are the shiny, cool things, but really the bulk of the ridership is on the bus system. You have the Metro Rail, which for years was just that green line. And all we've done with the surtax so far is extended it to the airport. So that is the one Metro Rail expansion we did pay for and achieve. Now, it really was more than just an extension. They also increased service all the way down to Dayland, what we now call the Orange Line. So all that was paid for.
And just a little ancient history, the Metro Rail first opened in 1984. Back in the good old days where you got 80% of the funding from the feds, 10% from the state, and Dade County at the time had to come up with 10% of the capital costs. That required a public referendum to issue bonds for that. And after it passed, there was actually a second referendum to try to repeal it because there were people that thought that this was a boondoggle and a waste of money. And that fortunately that repeal failed by a very narrow margin. And so what I want to stress is what seemed like a crazy idea in 1984, Dade County would be lost without the metro rail. Traffic would be unbearable. The development and the urbanization that has happened wouldn't have happened without the system. So the importance of planning ahead and sticking with it, again, very, very important.
And you guys are in the enviable position of learning from us and learning from Broward. We didn't have anyone to learn from in the state of Florida, right? We're kind of often first in these things, and so we make a lot of mistakes, but now you get to learn from us. And then the Metro Motor, as you can see over to the right, serves the downtown, the larger downtown area with an automated people mover. It's fantastic. So, we made a lot of promises, right? Rapid transit, bus improvements, roadway projects, the fare free for all seniors, fare free Metro Motor. Not sure why that one's in it, but that got in there. Originally, we were gonna expand Metro Rail or rapid transit another 90 miles. Major highway and road improvements totaled, I think, like 40 something projects. So it was a long litany of projects that were promised, like in order to get everyone vested, and have a stake in its passage. And it worked politically, but again, now we're trying to actually get all this done. And most of this has been done, in all fairness. I think what remains to be done is the expansion of rapid transit, and we're engaged in that now. One thing I want to point out that's really important is the maintenance of effort. So there was this fear that this would be a bait and switch, much like the lottery. And so we included a maintenance of effort that the counties and the cities' budgets dedicated to transportation would have to remain at least as it was in 2002. They could never cut from that. So that general fund obligation or wherever other sources that were supporting the systems in 2002 have to stay at that level. And then a few years later, I think then Commissioner Carlos Jimenez added an escalator clause to the county portion. So it has to be what it was in 2002 plus 3 to 5% every year. So that funding for transit is protected and continues to grow. Now, it's still not, right? So we can continue to have to subsidize that, but at least we have that. Otherwise, you do open yourself up to a bait and switch, where you cut the budget for transit and supplement it with a half penny, you haven't really gained it.
And I think after all these promises and everybody being excited about the projects, the next mayor, so 5 years after the tax pass, the next mayor had to issue a memo saying, hey, we analyzed this and the real costs, and it's gonna be a little harder to deliver on these corridors than we originally thought, and so.
Yeah, it comes to Jesus on it.
Yes.
All right, so again, these are just some of the things that we have funded, again, including the Metro Rail to the Orange Line, replacement of all the fleets you have, the trolleys there, which I'll talk about now. Here's the extension to the airport, and it's a great station, and Tri-Rail is going there, Amtrak, hopefully one day will join us there. And it's, you know, in this day and age, if you're gonna be a global city, you have to have, you know, rapid transit connection to your airport. And not just for the visitors, but for the workers. I mean, that is probably one of our, if not the largest employment center in Miami-Dade County. So again, I said the cities did a great job with their half share. Now, with the cities, we require that they spend a minimum of 20% on transit, the other 80% they can spend on other types of transportation projects, like roadway projects, iPad projects, et cetera. But by now, 20 years into it, 32 out of the 34 municipalities are running some kind of transit system. Either a fixed route, trolley, as we call them, trolley on river tires, or increasingly on demand. So when on demand came on the scene, cities started to ask us if they could use their funds to supplement things like freebie, or here you have certainly, or even Uber or Lyft. And we had to change the ordinance to allow for that. And that's something people were thinking about in 2002. And now most of the cities, or at least half of them, are doing that either in addition to or in lieu of a fixed circuit. You can see on the map where all those take place. And most of them are connecting in some way to the county's regional transit system, right? Metro Rail, Metro Motor, Metro Bus.
And I was on both sides of this, first at the city where the county was redirecting their bus routes to keep them on straight lines on the major arterials and asking that the city pick up the slack and extend the trolleys to those points. And that's really how it should work. We want those long haul routes on the major arterials, maybe with express service, and then the city fills in the fabric, and when all this becomes part of land use planning, so you can ensure density around these routes, and that's how you get to
Now, again, not all of those granted, we did have a number of roadway projects, 2/3 of which have been completed, the others are in some process of being completed. As they're completed, we'll have. Enhanced bus service never really happened. We were supposed to really dramatically expand bus service. It started to happen, and then during the Great Recession, they stopped expanding. Frankly, we're at the same level of revenue service we are today than we were in 2002. But there was a major redesign of the bus network recently, the better bus network, and, we're plugged into that. service. We also built parking rides. There are a couple of recent ones, the Dolphin parking ride and the Tamiami Station parking ride. And then commuter rail investments. So these are the ones you might be familiar with, is we, both our surtax funds and the city of Miami's surtax funds help to pay for the Tri-Rail station at the Miami Central Station. And happy to say that Tri-Rail started coming into downtown Miami in January. Thank you, David. And they've been a great partner to us. And then, of course, the Aventura Brightline Station. And we put $77 million in surtax funds into that, with the hope that it will also be a commuter rail station in the future, in addition to that wonderful Brightline service that I took today. So, smart plan. This is really, all of our focus now is in getting this done. And I'm sure you've heard about this before, but the smart plan is there on your left. It's a series of 6 corridors. It's the same corridors that were promised to people back in 2002. And now it's got this new branding. And the video I'm not going to play, but you can see essentially the overview there.
So even before the smart plan and before the 2002, there was a report in 1993, which I had a copy of in the world. And it basically said the metro is 8 years old. What's next? And those 6 corridors are always the corridors that every plan comes back to. And transit enthusiasm for transit increases as congestion worsens, and the time that people are wasting in traffic gets worse and worse, and it impacts their lives. That's what starts to move the needle. And I'll say, maybe around 2000, if a developer was planning something around a metro rail station or a metro motor station, they were planning it so their back of house and the loading docks was facing the station. And as the market changes and people's demands change, now you see developers fighting for the land around the station to build a transit-oriented development. So in 2015, when I got hired in Miami-Dade County, the mayor was up for re-election, and the number one issue was congestion and traffic, and where are the rapid transit lines, and became this focus on the halfpenny and moving the projects forward. And that support is what helps solidify the SMART plan. And what's really important about the SMART plan is that 40-year pro forma that Javier showed. It shows that all these projects are moving forward in parallel. Some projects are simpler and are in EA, or others are EISs and whatever, but they all move forward in parallel. So it's not, this project can't get moved to that one.
And that's one of the things that stalled us in the past too, to be honest, is that the commissioners were always competing to see who would go first, which of the corridors would go first, and they couldn't come to an agreement, so nothing got done. So, proceeding kind of together roughly, has been great, and all the commissioners are supporting. So these are the 6 corridors, and we'll go into a little more detail. South corridor heading down Homestead, the beach corridor connecting downtown Miami Beach, the east-west corridor essentially connecting, our employment center downtown all the way west to roughly FIU. The Kendall corridor, which is frankly where our workforce tends to live. The northeast corridor, we're all very familiar with, that's essentially the Brightline Tri-Rail line. And the north border of 27th Avenue to the Broward County line and the stadium. So the good news is this one is under construction thanks to this right here. We launched it and got it under construction in record time. About the south border.
So the south corridor runs 20 miles south of where the metro rail currently ends at Dayland. And back in the early 1990s, Dade County received a CIG grant from the Federal Transit Administration to build a busway and dedicated land that used to be a railroad. So that paralleled US 1, one of the most contested arterial roadways in Dade County. and really the lifeline for all of southern Dade County. So there was a very heated debate. Do we do rail? Do we do rapid transit as this extension for the South Corridor? And as this debate raged on, we came up with a pie chart. And we said, we have this much money for the smart plan. And if we do rail, it will use 75% of the pie chart. And if we do bus rapid transit, it will have 12% of the pie chart. And the other thing is this, the FTA rating criteria. The bus rapid transit got a high rating because part of it is cost versus ridership. So obviously bus rapid transit accomplishes everything a train can accomplish. We actually have gate arms that are gonna come down at the signalized intersections. So the bus never has to stop. The bus marks the traffic signal that drills the signal arms. And that hadn't been done anywhere else, but it crystallized that you're gonna move just as fast, but at a fraction of the cost to build, at a fraction of the cost to operate and maintain, and that allows funding for the public. So what you see here is a cut through of the station, and there's actually an air conditioned vestibule in the center. So you might have meant earlier up on a platform, so you might catch breeze, and there's some fans, but here, you know, we want to make this a desirable transit service. People want to use it, not because they have to use it. So people are very excited. And we passed improved land use designations around the corridor, and there's all kinds of development, and this is where the workforce and affordable housing development is happening along this corridor. So it's everything that you talk about in theory comes together.
Yeah, you need to plan your land use along with your transit. Transit doesn't work without density and intensity of uses. It simply doesn't. And the great thing is if you do it together, you can find a way of taking the value created by that density and intensity, that development, and use it to help fund the system. So one of the things the county did is they created a TIF, right, which I think they call the Transit Impact Development Zone. And so within a half-mile radius of every corridor, every planned corridor, as the values of those properties rise, that incremental increase is gonna go back into this plan, and that's generating about $2 billion as part of the performance. And on top of that, you could also do special assessment districts and things. So we're gonna move a little more quickly. I think we're running out of time. So Metro Mover has been, right now, at least, the flavor of the month, is the proposed technology for connecting downtown to Miami Beach along the MacArthur Causeway, and then also then up towards these, now, I was gonna say merging neighborhoods, but they're beyond merging, Greenwood, Design District, all that stuff. Okay, in terms of the east-west corridor, this kind of is in a state of flux. It was gonna be bus rapid transit. Now they're talking about potentially Metro Mover, potentially using the CSX rail lines for commuter rail. Sure, where this is going, this is taking the step back. The Kenmore corridor, unfortunately, is, I call it the bastard stepchild of the smart plan, because even though it's one of the most important corridors, it doesn't have a political champion. And one of the things you're gonna learn is you need political champions for all of this. Every corridor needs to have a commissioner, you know, just pushing it on a regular basis. And the commissioners of this particular district aren't pro-transit, so it's never really had that champion, but it is critically important. This is the one I think you're all familiar with here, because you know it as a tri-rail coastal link. It's the one that will ultimately, hopefully connect the tri-county region. That is the northeast corridor. This is probably gonna be the next one to launch, because it's low hanging fruit, right? The tracks are there. The parties are interested in getting it done. The north border is gonna be the heaviest, because this community has been promised metro rail for decades, social equity, social justice issue at this point. And it is the one corridor that is being proposed for elevated rail, which means it's gonna take a long time. It's gonna be very expensive. And it's still in the planning stages, but this will help connect us to Broward County. Okay, and as I said earlier, this really takes different levels of funding. The traditional, you know, federal, state, with a little local isn't gonna cut it. Yeah, this is making me hungry, I apologize. But you know, we have those green check marks or what we pulled together so far, including public-private partnerships with people like Brightline. But there are all these other types of funding that we can, and frankly, if you ask me, should go after, but you know, they're politically sensitive. We won't go into this. We have additional areas, things that we focus on. We launched an ambassador program where we have our riders engaged as our eyes and ears on the system. They get rewarded for that with points. And I started a podcast. So if you're ever interested in being on it, you know, it's called Mobility Matters, and David was the star of the show not too long ago. So thank you for being. So, last slide, I promise, this is kind of lessons learned and what you all should take away from this. Go for it. You need this. I mean, honestly, you absolutely need this. Selfishly, some of us in Miami-Dade County may say, you know what, don't do it. It's not worth it because you're gonna be competing against the same grants we're going after. And there's a lot of competition on that. So, you know, frankly, it's gonna be harder for us to compete if you have a local match. But we all rise, or sing together as a region. So what's good for the region is good for us. You need those, you know, scratches. It's got a huge economic impact and return on investment. So you really need to sell that component to the public and to your officials. In terms of the campaign, engage your community in building the plan. Identify those political champions and list a dedicated team to work on it. Really focus on community outreach and media, and don't overpromise. Don't make the mistake we did, because you'll pay for that later. In terms of the plan components, I would encourage you to have an oversight board. But if you do or you don't, just be clear about what an oversight board is authorized to do. There's often a lot of conflict that arises when those roles aren't clear. We still argue, you know, what our proper role is all the time. If you're gonna give the cities a portion of the money, ensure that it's done in such a way that really connects them to the overall system. I think Broward has a much better plan in place, frankly, on how they engage the municipalities with their surtax funds. Be prescriptive, obviously, you have to tell the community what you're gonna do with these funds, but also remain flexible. Again, I think Broward has a better model. They really built a lot of flexibility into the plan, which is great. Be clear about how much funding is gonna go to the existing system versus expansion. The reality is, you're probably gonna have to help upgrade the existing system and help with some of those operations and maintenance costs. Make that clear from the beginning, so that there aren't these kind of unmet expectations. And finally, I would give serious thought to the pros and cons of subsidizing transit fares. There's a debate in the country whether we should even charge for transit at all and just consider it a service like ours. But, you know, really think that through, because there are cons. Obviously, we'd be getting more fare revenue if we didn't have fare free for all seniors. But without that, it may not have passed. So, any other lessons?
You know, I think the most important thing is to, as you develop the plans for the corridors and the concepts, as much definition that you can provide upfront, you know, like at decision, bus rapid transit or rail, it's not that hard to see the numbers, which way to go. Because that provides clarity down the line. And once you have your surtax in place and you start investing in those corridors, you'll avoid pivoting in the future. Because every time you say, well, let's not do metro rail and let's do bus rapid transit, every time you pivot, you lose a few years in the process. So, the more that you can do upfront to solidify the vision for the plan and match up the numbers to what you're delivering, the easier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would think that, relative to plan horizon is probably a conversation to have in the roundtable or after the roundtable discussion. Miami-Dade County, we don't have sunsetting, right? Yours goes on in perpetuity.
That's nice.
Okay. Broward County, we have a 30-year horizon, right, for sunsetting. There are some potential changes to legislation that are happening right now that we'll talk about later, but those things affect your planning horizon. So those are very important to keep in mind as you're embarking on the potential of having this dedicated funding. And I will say that I told you I got the sneak peek. I printed this out, Javier, because I thought it was a really good start. And what are the things that you need to consider? And that being said, I know we've had to breeze through some slides. All of these will be posted. Every slide has great information on it, so I encourage you to go back and look. So now we get to really go regional. And I guess David and Allie, gonna hand this over to you. I will say this, you know, as Javier and Alice were going through the different options at the Miami International Airport, I can honestly say I have taken Metro Rail to the airport. I've taken Brightline with the shuttle to the airport, and I've also taken Tri-Rail to and from the airport. So, and of course, the Metro will take all the way to Miami. So anyway, these are options for me as a business person that have been incredibly helpful to be more efficient, safe. So I figured I would add that in literally to be someone who actually uses this mass transportation. Thank you. David, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Again, to introduce myself, my name is David Deck. I am the Executive Director for SFRTA, and we operate Tri-Rail on behalf of the state of Florida. Been here for about a year and a half. I've spent most of my career in freight railroading, so 23 years in freight railroading. Went through a very similar time like this in Austin, Texas. So I spent 4 years in Austin. And I was part of the team there that passed Project Connect, which was a $7 billion transportation program there in Austin. So a lot of this feels like deja vu to me. But I can tell you that these are the steps that have to be taken. You need to understand what you're getting into. You need to have lessons learned. You need to have that champion that will take this to go out to the Supreme Court. A little bit about Tri-Rail. And I'll apologize in advance. A lot of my slides, Corey, I should have teamed up with Corey and vetted our slides together, but you did a great job, so it's going to save me a lot of time. So, anyway, SFRTA began service on Tri-Rail in 1989. We have 81 miles with 19. I get used to saying 18 stations, but now I say Javier, 19 stations, including the station, beautiful station that we share with Brightline in downtown Miami Station. And we run 50 weekday trains, 30 on the weekends. So we also run 26 shuttle trains right now between our metro transfer station and downtown Miami Central. We updated this slide recently to 15,000 average weekday ridership. Why that's important is we are no longer referring to pre-COVID numbers. So as you're going through and you're listening to the presentations and you're wondering if there's room in the pool for all of these options, the answer is yes. It is not, is it, Brightline or Tri-Rail or the Broward Rail or the Commuter Rail or Tri-Rail? The answer is yes, and it's not or. A year and a half ago, we were at 11,000 riders a day. So that is how quickly our ridership is growing. We also have first mile, last mile connections. We partner with Ubers and taxis here in Baltimore County, Broward County. We connect to all 3 airports to take you directly into Miami International Airport. We run an airport shuttle at the Fort Lauderdale Airport, and we partner with Uber and taxis to fully subsidize the ride from our Palm Beach station over to the Palm Beach International Airport. Corey hit this number right there, 50,000 jobs for every billion invested in transit. And if you look here, this is not all money going into government agencies, right? So $42 billion in transit spending, and 65% of that flows back to the private sector. So I think that's important to know. These job creators at a 5-to-1 economic return on your investment. I think that important. A lot has been said. My next few slides, I'm going to go through very quickly. Lots been talked about with TODs, but I think, you're starting to see that. You see it a lot in Miami. You see it around the Brightline stations. I would have never believed it when I worked for CSX. And anybody wanted to live near a freight yard. No one wants to live by a freight yard. No one wants to live by the train tracks. It's quite the opposite, right? So when I moved to Austin, they started talking about these TODs. I don't know what TOD is. I had to wait till after a meeting and ask somebody, what does that mean? And they said transit oriented development. I said, okay, what does that mean? So they explained that people actually live near train stations. That was a foreign concept. But then I saw them. We had several in Austin. One was built when I got there. We built 2 more while we were there. I was there recently. They've got 2 more in the works. It's amazing watching the growth coming here. When I first got here, we had, we were talking about the transit village here in West Palm, and that's moving forward. I think they're working through some issues minor, I think. But it's starting to be embraced here along our line. We have the West Palm Beach here, Transit Village. We have one at Boca Raton. We have several others in the works that we'll talk about, but it is very important to come up with a trend when you go through this, to go through a TOD policy, make sure you understand what you're asking for, because this is really the economic driver here, what you can do around these stations. You want to bring as much density as you can around these stations. It's an opportunity for, you know, the counties, municipalities, and the railroads, whoever, to kind of bring in some density, some workforce housing, some affordable housing. People who want to use the trains, who want to use the buses, and depend on it, bring that in there and really transform the areas around these stations. And you can see here, you know, we've gone to the local municipalities here, that we have property, and encourage them to look at the land use policies around our stations. This is the Tri-Rail corridor. As you can see there, we have, where we have initiatives already in place at the West Palm Beach, the Boca, Cypress Street, as well as our Metro Transfer Station down in Hialeah. And then there's other opportunities where we don't necessarily own the land, but some other people own the land, at Lake Worth and Delray, Sheridan Street Station, and then the Hialeah Market. So there's just many, many opportunities to develop. And I think the key for us, kind of going off the slide here a little bit, but the key for us was to be a good neighbor. In order to attract serious people to want to put in, you know, real estate and live near a railroad, we had to be a better neighbor. We had to put out a better product. We had to have a better looking product. You know, we've put a ton of effort into cleaning up our railroad, removing garbage, debris, and everything from the railroad. If you go to one of our stations now, you'll see several of them will have tarps over the overhead bridges while we're doing some rehabilitation on our overhead bridges. We recently completed a station assessment of all of our stations, and we have funding to go in and then bring all of our stations up to what we think is a minimal acceptable standard. I'd like to go a little bit higher than a minimal acceptable standard, but I'll start with minimal first and work my way up. Because that is what's gonna bring people around and want to live near us, is a quality service, a quality railroad, a quality transportation system that's reliable, and people want to be part of. So you can see here just renderings, of some of the TOD initiatives that we have in place. The Transit Village, West Palm Beach, we're very excited about that. Boca Raton, we're working with the 13th floor investment down there. And then we currently have RFPs that were out and advertised for our Boynton Beach and our Cypress Street stations. And we have a broker evaluating. We have some miscellaneous parcels around our Metro Transfer Station that we're looking at here to see if we can do some things with those and improve that area. So additionally, I know this will be near and dear to everybody's heart here, Valerie, thank you, and the Palm Beach TPA. You know, we have, Vice Mayor Burr, talked about earlier, we're kind of built out, so we are looking at different areas here where that we can possibly do some different things and expand. So just touch on a couple of projects we've got here. We have an existing layover facility that's, you know, right up the road here in the middle of West Palm Beach. It's very small, it's less than an acre. We have a Palm Beach funded, TPA funded project to build a new northern layover facility, which is just north of our Mangonia Park station. We are currently, well, I get that next slide. So what we're looking for here is a little bit more efficient use of our time. We designed a layover facility. It's going to have a full inspection pit underneath. Very nice buildings. So the aesthetically pleased. We'll have sound barriers up for the local neighborhood. It is a little bit of industrial area, but there is a brand new development that went in there. So we want to be a very good neighbor. So the first thing we'll do is install a sound wall. It'll have wayside power so that we don't have to keep trains running all night while we work on them. And right now it's being designed. It's being designed to house 10 train sets. They'll probably built to hold 8 train sets as we go on. You know, the money's there, and kind of what you can do with it becomes a little bit less. But, we do have, we're projecting a little over $50 million project cost. This is a fully funded project, and thank you. And we were just up this week talking with the city of Mangonia Park and going over some of our plans for this. We are very excited to continue to push this plan forward. We are 90% design. We expect 100% design by this summer. And then we have some utility. We're working with JPL, moving some utilities up there. We'll advertise the contractor to go out in fall of 2024 and then really look at about a 2-year construction cycle. Additionally, we have just launched a feasibility study to evaluate and extend Tri-Rail service 3 miles on the CSX tracks. So just north of our Mangonia Park station to a new station at the VA Medical Center. This has been talked about a lot. You know, on the surface, it seems like a fantastic idea. But we do want to make sure we do our due diligence, we're conducting the feasibility study as we speak, to identify ridership funding. And really, we have to see if CSX is interested. So, this is a portion of the railroad that is not FDOT owned, so this would be a negotiation with CSX to see if we can come to some terms there. I think it'd be a fantastic station, and really, be a real driver of ridership up there. So I'm very interested to see what we can come up with here. This is a long-term plan. This is not certainly something that's gonna happen tomorrow. But we have Miami Central Station, and I want to thank, you can't thank enough people, really the partners that helped make this happen, but obviously the CITT and Brightline working together to make this happen. The Florida East Coast Railroad were instrumental in making this happen. It's really a game changer for us. It's going to be an evolving service. Right now we're running shuttle kind of back and forth as we as the schedule matures. We look to run some direct service in there. But that is just a vibrant area of downtown, and I think is, to sort of everything back to the TOD. I mean, this is really an example of what can be done when something is well thought out, well planned, and well built. If you look at that entire area around that station, that has changed because of what Brightline has done down there, and that is possible to do, anywhere along any of these alignments. So thank you. I tried to make it brief. But this is our new livery, by the way. You see the trains, that's eventually what they'll all look like. And the new Northern Railroad facility does have a fully automated train wash, so we will be keeping our trains. So that's my favorite feature. Yard, so that's all I have.
Alan, you're up.
Thanks, still morning, good morning. I'm also going to skip a couple of my slides for the end, but 12 years ago, next month, is actually when Florida East Coast Industries announced what we formerly know all over Florida, and today is known as Brightline. So how many people, when they heard that announcement 12 years ago, actually thought that that project would make it to reality? How many people looked at the person next to them and said, those people are crazy? How many times has this been tried? Exactly. And so I think that that's actually an amazing place to start, because while we are a private company, getting the project to where it is today, opening Orlando in September, wouldn't have happened probably without everybody in this room. I can look at every single person and see the impact that they made on getting our project through our environmental phases, support when we needed it for funding initiatives, and really just supporting us and making sure that people knew that there was the demand and there was the need for the project. And frankly, now those same people ride Brightline. And so when Dave and I were talking about doing this panel, we looked at each other and said, I think we were invited to show that it works. That people actually are taking transportation when it's available and when it's convenient. And I think Brightline and obviously Tri-Rail are perfect examples of that. So just when I asked Valerie what she wanted me to present on, she said a quick update on Brightline, where we are and what's happened. So for those of you who may not have taken Brightline or been on it, we currently, as of September, operate from South and Central Florida. We have 5 stations in South Florida, downtown Miami, Aventura, thanks to our partnership with the CITT, our station in downtown Fort Lauderdale, our station in Boca, thanks to our partnership with the city of Boca, West Palm Beach, and then all the way straight back to Orlando. This represents a more than $6 billion private sector investment into transportation into our state. I mean, it really is tremendous what we've been able to accomplish. We're currently operating 16 daily round trips, which equates to 32 trains between South and Central Florida. We're at the point where our ridership is growing so much that we've actually placed an order with Siemens to order more train coaches so that we can add capacity to our trains that are operating. Yesterday, I was sitting at home and I said, oh my gosh, I have to be in Palm Beach County. I didn't book my train ticket. And thankfully, they were like, I don't know, 8 seats left on my train that I could book. I mean, it's crazy, when you get on, there are people with suitcases, there are people who got off in West Palm Beach with briefcases. Every single person that you're taking, or that's taking Brightline is traveling for a different reason, but they're on it. I mentioned we have about 240 seats on each train. We will add about 6 seats per coach for the 5 coaches that will come on board. And the train from Miami to Orlando takes about 3.5 hours. We released, and I have it open in front of me, our January revenue and ridership report. So to further demonstrate that our ridership continues to grow, in January, we carried more than 236,000 passengers compared to 156,000 in January of 2023. So the addition to Orlando has been incredibly beneficial for our company. Our long distance ridership is 52% of our total monthly ridership in January, compared to 49% in December, 45% in November, and 39% in October. And so that continues to demonstrate that the more awareness, the more people take Brightline, the more they don't talk about it, the more we continue to see our ridership grow, because it really is a better alternative than driving between South and Florida. What do we have ahead of us? We have an active RFP with our partners in the Treasure Coast. So in December, we initiated our first public RFP where we're seeking proposals to construct a station either in Martin or St. Lucie County. And we received 5 proposals, and we're in the process of reviewing them. We did announce that we would make an announcement before the end of Q1, and that is still on track. We are actively working on our Tampa extension. Tampa is obviously the next major market for us. It is, when we connect to Tampa, we will connect more than 50% of the state. So this is an incredible opportunity. In hosting some representatives from the Hillsborough County and Tampa area, we had Kelly and others meet with them with us. And it was just incredible to hear them talk about even the business synergies between West Palm Beach, Palm Beach County region, and the Tampa market. And the excitement that even everybody thinks that the Tampa will connect to Orlando, but it's really Tampa connecting into this system and the benefits and the economic opportunities that it will create. And then Dave and others talked about the SFRTA service that culminated into Miami Central earlier this year. And that's really incredible, because how many partners worked on that project? I think 9 or 11, all of them, to get consensus and also consensus to fund that instrumental of a project truly is mind blowing, and does show that by working together as a region and as a group, we can accomplish things. What do we have in the future? We have our St. Lucie River Bridge grant replacement project. The city of Stewart was recently awarded about $130 million grant to replace the existing single track St. Lucie River Bridge. That bridge has a vertical clearance of 6 feet 6 inches. The new bridge will have an increased vertical clearance of about 16 feet. It will be double tracked. So that will be really instrumental for both the movement of freight and passenger service in the region, not to mention an economic benefit for the city as well as the marine industry. And then safety continues to be the company's top priority, really. The RAISE grant was a partnership between Brightline, the Florida Department of Transportation, and the Defense. So we have a $45 million project that will include safety enhancements in every single county from Miami-Dade all the way up to Brevard. We are working with the FRA and with FDOT to execute the grant. For anybody who deals with federal grants, you know how challenging that's going to be. So we hope that we're in the final stages of that. Then we'll go into a final design process and look to get started on that. But again, we constantly look to our partners and those in this room to add enhancements for the project, especially as it relates to the safety world. I'm using my computer. I also had a quick slide about the Northeast corridor because there is so much substantial progress that is happening in Miami-Dade County. I think Javier already talked to it, and at the end, I have a little asterisk, because I knew Corey was going to cover, the talks in Broward. But again, I think that this just continues to show that in 2005, the Florida Department of Transportation actually announced what was known as the South Florida East Coast Corridor Transit Analysis Study. And that looked at commuter rail from downtown Miami all the way up to Jupiter. That was in 2005. It's 2024, and we're still talking about it, and it's getting closer to reality. So I do think that Brightline and these other projects that are actually able to be accomplished, constructed, built, and opened do go to show that we can make progress by working together, and that there is a demand for such services. Keeping it short. That's it.
Thank you, Emily. I will say this, before the Orlando station was opened, and I kept bugging you and others, and when is it gonna open? I vowed that I would never drive to Orlando again. If that station opened, they have kept to my word, just so you know. And really hoping to be able to say the same when Tampa station opens, so keep up the great work. Thank you so much for all that you do. Now, before we get into our roundtable discussion, there's one member of this panel up here that didn't get a lot of airtime, and I'm about to pick on him a little bit, and that's Randall, because, let me share this. First of all of the panelists here have been briefed on the status of the penny infrastructure surtax here in Palm Beach County, the history of it, and when it's anticipated to sunset. And we all know how important the business community was in helping push that forward, get over the finish line. Now we're talking about, amongst panelists here, we're talking about a transportation surtax. And Randall, I know that Broward Workshop was really instrumental in the passage of that. And I was wondering if you could share with the transportation surtax, what was really important to the business community and convinced you to really help advocate for this and see the correct revenue out of that.
Sure, thank you. In 2006, when the surtax for the first time was on the ballot, it was actually Broward Workshop Initiative. And I was not a member at that time, but we funded it completely, came together completely. And it was clear that there was so much economic benefit in it. Congestion was going to be an issue. Moving people was going to continue to be an issue. And so the workshop generally has always been behind transportation and surtax. It became a political quagmire, like in 2016 and the 2018 time passed. Any way you slice it, all of the group was in favor of a solution. Now, what was key was how do you get the cities on board, the collaboration of having an independent oversight board, and the funding for a campaign, which public dollars cannot be used, it could come from either private companies or, membership workshop division. So when you're going out and campaigning, there was dollars that would be done. When we got behind the 2018 initiative, there was still reluctance by many members, but overwhelmingly the support was there to do it, knowing that most of these things take a lot of time from the time it passes to the time you see the benefit. And there was consensus also that however hard it seemed on the 2018, and I would say this is the case now as well, however hard you think it will be to pass, it'll never be easier than if you have to pass it right now. It's only going to get harder. State of Florida is continuing to put constraints on surtaxes and having counties being able to pass them. And so that consensus, which being mentioned, there was a lot of folks who said 2018 is not the time to do it, we should wait until 2020. And had that happened, it wouldn't have passed. So if you have the interest, you have the support right now, even a small group to make it happen, I would say go all in and try to make it happen, because it takes time to build the consensus, and you do need that bottom-up approach. You have all the stakeholders. The cities are really important, the business community is very important, having leadership of the county is really important, but there's nothing to be taken for granted. You have to do all of the meetings, all the blocking and tackling that you think you might need to do is required to get consensus.
Thank you, and I was reminded of all the work that it takes when I looked at one of Broward County's slides on the time frame that you all have. So yes, it is a lot of work. Now you have the OPAGA element, which Which Vice Mayor, I see how that brings a lot of credibility, accountability, the process and benefit of that, but it is like a 3-month process for their review, correct? So it's just something to take into account. So all that being said, we do have, our time for roundtable questions, discussions. There are many of you sitting around the table for private sector, public sector. So we'd just like to open it up for whoever would like to dive